Is everyone admitted to the meeting? Ms. Yassine, I think you're.
Yes, that I know of, everybody is in. I don't see anybody else waiting. By the way, if anybody does see somebody waiting, please feel free to let them in now that we're live. But
Okay.
I can't see anybody else there other than us.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone to another meeting of the Advisory Committee on Equity and Justice for All for the town of Scituate. I do want to start off by saying that that name, the change of name was approved by the select board, the Board of Select people. So we are happy to announce that we will now be the Scituate DEI Committee. I believe
Right,
that's
so
the full
the
name.
formal will be Scituate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which I think we will definitely abbreviate from time to time, yeah.
Great. All right, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Wonderful.
And I'll second.
All right, so I have a few things that I'd like to go over before we get going.
So that is, we need to vote that, please. And
Oh, I'm
then-
sorry. We need a roll call.
Yes, please. At 6:34.
34. All right, so today is February 16th. It is now 6:34 p.m. and I will call the roll. Ms. Dre.
Yes.
Reverend Stewart.
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor.
Yes.
Ms. Yassine.
Yes.
Ms. Risha.
Yes.
Ms. Harriman.
Yes.
And my vote is also yes. Okay. Wonderful. In response to Governor Baker's declaration on public health emergency and related emergency executive order dated March 12, 2020, Town of Scituate public meetings shall meet remotely until further notice. This meeting will be recorded by Scituate Community Television and can be viewed live on Scituate Community Television Facebook Live. The recorded meeting will be available the following day on Comcast Channel 9 and YouTube Scituate Community Television. Okay. I'd like to take a moment to do a tribal acknowledgement for the Wampanoag, inhabited and still inhabit this area of the world. Right now, the news is reporting that although the Wampanoag tribe has mostly been able to avoid the pandemic, it has infiltrated their people most recently, and the amount of care and access to resources has been less than acceptable, particularly heading closer to Mashpee and further on the Cape, and also in Martha's Vineyard. So my hope is that if you can assist in any way or know how to assist in any way, that you make that effort or a phone call to see what might be needed. I'm going to move right into our safe space and norms. This is a safe space for people of color. Any comments that are inappropriate or have an animus in racism or bias will not be allowed. We will turn your sound off if your comments are offensive to the meeting. This is a safe space where people can bring up challenges and questions without fear of repercussion or hostility. We'd like you to take the learning but leave the story so that people feel comfortable sharing their experiences. We want to assume best intentions. All participants are embarking on a journey at different starting points. Please listen, read, and be kind. Use respectful language. We ask when you are unsure what that means. And administrators will remove anyone with inappropriate content or acting inappropriately. All right, our first order of business is the acceptance of the minutes. Are there any comments before I hear a motion on the minutes? No? Okay. Seeing no comments, I'll entertain a motion. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
I second.
I didn't hear who that was. Oh, Ms. Dre. Thank you, Ms. Dre. Seconding. Let's call the roll. Ms. Dre,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Harriman,
Yes.
and my vote is also yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Yassin, for doing a wonderful job with the minutes and getting them out to us all on time.
Well, and thank you to Mr. Clark for correcting some of my misstatements as far as how to do the civil service, because I know being accurate is really important there. And Mr. Clark, could you update us? Some things that changed as far as hiring for SFD and SPD. Maybe an update on, because we were going to make a statement on that and then didn't do so. So
Right. Yes, so with each of those departments, the Scituate Fire Department, we're currently, I'm not sure the exact number, but we're probably up to 5 vacancies at the moment. So we're actively recruiting to fill those positions. We've had some difficulty just getting qualified applicants through the civil service list. I think there'll be a list coming out on March 1st. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to get some new recruits in. What happens is all towns are looking at the same list, pulling from that same list of paramedics. So, but we're actively recruiting to fill a number of vacancies in that department. I believe we have 1 vacancy in the Scituate Police Department. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mandy, but and we're actively looking to fill that as well right now.
That's correct, Bob.
If we're kind of going over some of the things that we're clarifying from last week, there was a comment made that preference is given to those relatives of officers that have lost their lives in the line of duty.
Correct.
And that makes absolute sense to me. But the concern is that even though if they pass all their tests, presumably they're able to do their job without any kind of malice towards anyone, despite having had such a huge loss. But could it be troublesome to have someone that's had such a huge loss given preference on the force in the same town, area, neighborhood where that loss may have happened, particularly if it's in a community of color? The conversation moved to, well, if we're going to give preference to relatives of officers that have lost their lives in the line of duty, are we then also giving preference to people who have lost their lives as a result of questionable police action? And there's no answer. Oh God, I'm so sorry about my screen tonight. There's no answer necessarily to that immediately, but I think the concern is that there may be, and it's a tragic thing to lose a relative in that way, and that there may subconsciously be biases that may filter into a person's ability to complete their obligations on the force. There's no answer to that. The only solid answer is obviously relatives of officers that have lost their lives in the line of duty should be available to them. But what does it mean if, what does it mean in terms of an officer returning to the same community where this incident happened, particularly where there are concerns over people of people of color or underrepresented populations. So I just wanted to bring that up. I know we have a lot to go through tonight.
So I
just to that point, a quick question, Mandy, you might be answering it. Is there some sort of psychological testing or that sort of thing before you become a police? I mean, I know there is if you're a priest, so I'm
right, there
assuming
is.
if you're an officer, there would be.
There's an extensive.
So that should weed out people
And so
who
I
are
think-
coming for revenge.
I believe right now there's only one person on the list who's, I mean, it would take a lot. You would have to want to be a police officer, right? You'd have to take the test. So I think, so actively right now, there's only one person in the whole state of Massachusetts on the list. So this, though it's obviously very important, is like a very minute population.
It's also, that individual would then have priority on any list in any town in the entire state. So they would really have that choice. They can go anywhere they want, so. The likelihood, you know, I mean, as it sort of applies to us, the likelihood that that person would be looking to come to this town is probably, you know, minute.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up because it was brought to my attention. Also, one other thing that was brought to my attention before we move on to voting versus non-voting is my uses of terms as the leader of the meeting. Sometimes I don't include everybody in addressing underrepresented communities, but when I'm talking about, if I say Black people, it's probably a habit, but I am not just talking about Black people. I'm talking about all people of color, and I will try and be cognizant of that. But generally, as I'm talking, my thoughts are always towards those who are underrepresented in this community in particular. If I leave someone out or I forget a particular population, it is not purposeful. But I do appreciate that being brought to my attention, so I wanted to bring that up. Okay, we are back onto our schedule here. Next is a discussion of old business involving voting versus non-voting members. Does anyone want to contribute to that conversation? This conversation, let me just preface it. We were talking about who, we wanted to clarify who is a voting member and who is a non-voting member and, you know, why. And also discuss, are we okay with that? My understanding is that when the vote happened, they were trying to make sure that there was an odd number of people on the actual advisory committee. And so 7 was the number that they settled on to make sure that there was an odd number of people. If we want to talk specifically, I think about the town employee representation, which is the position that Lucia holds. Let's talk about our thoughts on that position, voting versus non-voting. Any comments?
I brought up that conversation initially. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes. we
Okay.
can.
So obviously when I applied, it is, you know, it was what it was. I didn't know that there would even be a discussion, but after I thought about it, I think it's important that, you know, an employee should have a voice, especially when those changes that would be implemented would affect us specifically. So that was my thought process. I'm okay with just being a part of the group, but it was just a thought, just to see if maybe other people maybe agreed. I know that I've spoken to other employees here and they think it should be a voting membership.
Nikki, can I just ask what is, and I understand the math of having an odd number so that there's always one position that prevails, but what is the downside to having a split vote, for instance? So if we had 8 voting members, how does a tie vote get reconciled, so to speak?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's why it was 7, so it would never happen if we had a quorum.
Mhm.
Or everyone showed. So I can find out the answer to that question. And also, we probably should know if we would like to add the employee position to our list of voting members for this committee, and then we would bring it to the select board to make a decision on that and a change.
Nikki?
Yes,
I can see some pros and cons.
okay.
The pros is I agree with Lucia. I mean, here she's doing the work, and then you would want to have a vote on things you're working on. One of the cons is that right now, and I don't know what's going to happen to that if there's another member on this committee. Right now, we can only have 3 members at a time, voting members, in a discussion.
I
If
thought it was-
outside the major committee, no, it's 3. That's 3. I got to figure that 3. That time of night, 3.
Right.
I had a discussion with Miss Devon, the select board assistant, who it's 3.
Okay.
So right now we can talk with the other people who are not voting members. They can be on a subcommittee with us. We can have any or all of them on a subcommittee with us, and it's not a problem.
Mhm.
But now Lucia would, if she has a vote, she counts as one of those voting members. So now it's 2. I don't know what happens if we go to 8. I mean, again, a quorum is 4 now.
It would,
So maybe
it would,
we can
it would
go-
probably still be 3 because it has
Yeah,
to be
because
less-
your quorum
it
is
has to
still
be
4,
less
and
than
it's
a
got to be
quorum,
less
right?
than a quorum. So we're
Right.
still 3. So that
have
would
to go
be
to
the
9.
only drawback that I can see as far as having Lucia on, as long as she's willing to be on. I do, get concerned sometimes that there's a possibility that we might take unpopular actions at some point in time that people aren't happy with, and we didn't want to have any problems with that in the town situations. So that, I think, might have been one of the subtexts behind this decision also.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, I
certainly
tend to
have no
agree with
problem
you.
with Lucia having a vote. I do respect that a lot.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Lucia having a vote either, but I think if we have Lucia, we would have to move to 9 to ensure that, we don't run into the problem of, having a tie vote.
I think,
Any other thoughts? Yeah,
sorry.
go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Sorry about interrupting you. I think what's important to note for me, as a Black woman, as an immigrant, checking off pretty much all the boxes, I'm in it for the greater good. And if it means having more work, I'm willing to do that. So I think my vote, even if it's somewhat unpopular and it will ultimately give me more work, let's say, my vote is for the greater good, for the mission and goals of this committee. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I support Lucia in that, and I think there are other solutions for the math. Like, I know later on the agenda, we keep bringing up this youth committee, but didn't we also float the idea of a youth representative on this committee? So that would make it 9 instead of creating a brand new body. And I don't know if this is allowed too, but I'm even willing, I don't know if it's allowed for me to be a non-voting member and still participate as a resident, but I'd be happy to do that too for the math. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest the same, Celia. I'd be happy to do the same.
Well, to me, rather than taking people out, I'd rather be more inclusive. So we hadn't really, mentioned that about having a youth member of our committee, but that
That may
almost
be a
takes care of
resolution, yeah.
two things in a very unique, thoughtful manner that I think that might work out really well.
Okay, so why don't we?
Yeah, we can't deal with it today. We have to then talk to Maura about it and maybe come back and vote it next time. But perhaps we could get this a little more fleshed out before next meeting and come with a movement to set up these 2 positions that way.
Right, and also to find out about the tie, if we do have a tie,
But if we have two people, we're still back to, we're no longer, we don't have to worry about that part. So if
Right.
we propose, we would like a
Unless
youth
someone
member.
doesn't come to a meeting where we have to vote on something. And
But
then,
that can happen anytime.
yeah.
But how are people feeling about that concept? I mean, we are kicking it around at the moment, but it's something that we would put to a vote for next time on having a youth member. We propose this to the Board of Selectmen.
So
And they
that-
would then have to interview.
So in.
I don't want to group them together. I want to deal with one at a time. So
Right.
do we want to vote next time, have a discussion and vote next time on including the employee position, town employee position on this committee as a voting position? Is that something we'd like to do next time? Do we want to vote on it is the question? Because voting on it is saying we're then going to give it to Maura to bring to the select board. So is that something people would like to do?
Yeah, I think I agree that Lucia should have be a voting member. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. So I agree that, we should probably just, if we're not going to vote on it today, we'd vote on it next meeting.
Correct.
I agree as well.
So the
I agree
reason
as
for,
well.
wonderful. So the reason for that, if people don't know, is because we have to announce, when we're voting on something, we have to announce it in our agenda. So we have to announce that we're discussing it and voting on it in our agenda before the meeting. So we will add that, if you don't mind, Mr. Seen, to
Got it.
our next.
So that's one. And then do you want to
That's
save the
correct.
other discussion until we get down to that part?
Yes, let's give that its full attention
Okay.
as well.
So we've got one statement
Okay,
there.
wonderful. All right, Ms. Dre, setting up method of saving documents. So just for everyone to be clear, we as a committee cannot communicate with one another either through emails, writing, or anything with anyone more than 3 people on voting members on the committee. So, but we're collecting a lot of information that most members or all members of the committee need to see. So Ms. Dre has been working on figuring out a way for us to do that and have all of our research recommendations, et cetera, in one place. So do you want to tell us a little about that?
Yes. What I have created is a Slack channel for the committee. It is by invite only, so I will share the link with everyone. I've shared it with a few of you. So Ruth has most of the documents. She's providing us the agendas, the minutes. I think Tom with Ruth has, created some other documents that are in Excel that I think was circulated with the documents that we reviewed. So we can use Slack as basically a depository for these documents, and everyone can go in there and view them rather than having them on multiple emails. Like Nikki said, you can't communicate on the documents. You can't modify or change the documents. They're just there when you want to refer back to them. When a document is updated and we need to discuss it, Ruth will include it in the agenda, and then we can discuss it during our meetings. Is everyone familiar with Slack?
No.
Some. It's not difficult. I don't know it, I've been using it for a couple of months. But I think it's pretty easy. If you're just going in there to look at the documents, I've actually created folders. So there's a folder, they call it channels rather than folders. I don't know why, but there's a channel that just says agenda. So the agendas will be in there. The minutes will be in the minutes, and any other categories that we want to, separate the documents. I'll just save them there. So Ruth has a lot on her plate with creating all the forms and documents. So when she emails them to us as a group, I will save them in the Slack.
So I have a question about this. So when we make a correction to one of the documents in Slack, you would make that correction, is that right?
No, the corrections will come from Ruth,
I see,
and I will just place it in Slack in the folder.
for us to view, I get it.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's going to be a static document that sits there. So if a document gets changed or updated, the old one goes away and a new one comes in. Because we cannot work together on documents. That's our biggest issue.
Is there, Ms. Harriman, I noticed that you said you don't know what Slack is. I don't know if anyone else was shaking their head.
I'm a slacker.
Right.
I don't know what it is either.
So I'm assuming Google Docs is for privacy purposes, not an option.
Google Docs is not that private, and I don't think it's the best mechanism for only adding, well, for privacy reasons, but also only adding documents for that you can't read, that you can't comment or edit. This really allows only Angela to control all aspects of what's going in to this kind of shared folder.
I'm assuming it's easy enough for us to all learn.
It
It's
is.
very easy.
It's
It's
pretty
very
straight-
easy.
it's pretty straight.
I'm fine. I'm pretty okay with at least simple technology. Let's put it that way.
Well, I'm not, and I was able to figure it out. So
We'll
I think
figure it
you'll
out.
do great. I think you'll both do just fine. All right, thank you very much for figuring that out, Ms.
Kim,
Trey.
if anybody wants Angela, thank you, Angela, by the way, circulates the link to the Slack channel, I can always like connect with you and screen share to show you how to navigate it if needed.
Wonderful.
So I'm assuming, Angela, that we'll all end up signing in there at some point in time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send that out tonight. The link. Well, you
Wonderful.
have it, Ruth, but I'll send it to everyone.
And
And
thank
then
you,
when,
Scituate. I was
when
trying to
something comes
say-
out to you, you'll put it in the folders?
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Any other comments about slacking? No? Okay, great. All right, we're moving right along. Oh, yes, the timetable for recommendations to the select board for the quarter. Let's look at some calendars. This is something I definitely want us to kind of tentatively get established. We are supposed to do quarterly reports. I wanted to look at two things in conjunction. One is our meeting schedule. And then the select boards is kind of opposite. And two is what we're thinking about who's up first. So the departments we've kind of broken down into individual committee member groups. So I guess let's have a conversation about who's up first for the first quarter, things that we should have a timeline on for the second quarter as well, because it's going to come pretty fast. And anybody's thoughts on timing. So it's kind of 2 dates. So the first date would be solidifying what the recommendations are, and the second date would be voting to send it, right? So those are two kind of major milestones that we're talking about, which recommendations are going forward for whatever departments we've chosen. And then we're also voting to send it to the select board. So with that in mind, are there comments anyone would like to make?
Yeah, Nikki,
Yes.
I think a part of this conversation too should be fine tuning and agreeing on a process for the work before we assign like, oh, finance goes first, whoever had culture and recreation goes second. But for sake of timing, I think if my calendar is right, we're meeting on the 23rd. So that would mean, no,
March or
March.
April? Yeah.
March. Nope. Okay, I'm wrong.
Nope. I have the 16th of, we are meeting 3/2 and 3/16 and 3/30.
Okay, so then if we're meeting, for example, 3/16, could we aim to discuss at that meeting whatever we want to present to the select board? And then if they alternate with us, their meeting would be the following week? No?
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
I'm shaking my head no, because I know that it gets messed up in April. But yes, in May, March, it's still good.
Okay, so yeah,
So-
so maybe we aim to do that, but I think too, not to get ahead of ourselves, but because I also feel the need to recommend something, but maybe it's also sharing our recommended process. And I know later in the agenda, we're going to talk about maybe some immediate recommendations, if we could agree upon putting those forth to the select board. But I don't think we have to fully bake everything to present each department's recommendations at the end of the quarter. I don't think that's needed.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little later. Let's talk about people's feelings about the 16th being our first kind of deadline for whatever departments we discuss are going up first. Is that a good timeline for us?
Oh, no, so sorry, Nikki, I think maybe I was misspeaking. What I mean is maybe if we could pause and discuss the process before, just throwing out departments and, giving those recommendations to the select board.
No, I wasn't throwing out departments yet. I was just throwing out sorry. I was just throwing out kind of when we want to finalize whatever departments we choose to go forward with for the first quarter. And considering that it's March 16th, I mean, it is some time, but it's not a huge amount of time. So we should
Nikki,
keep that in.
I'm not understanding what you want with
Okay,
by saying that you want to choose departments to go forward with.
We're
I'm
not choosing.
following.
Okay, so we're not choosing departments right now. We're simply setting up timelines for our report. So quarterly, we're supposed to report to the select board. When we do that, later we'll talk about whose reports we're going to be giving for the first quarter. But we're not deciding that right now. We're simply deciding what's our deadline for our first report. When should we be readied with our first set of recommendations for the first quarter? That's the date is all we're deciding.
Okay, so can I just reflect? Because what I hear Celia saying is different from what I'm hearing you say. I hear Celia saying that instead of having a department go this first quarter, because it's really quick to try to get any recommendations in the next month, that she's proposing that for this first quarter, our recommendations to the board are just about our general process and how we plan to move forward, rather than actual actions for any particular department. Am I hearing you correctly, Celia? Okay.
Yes,
So,
and added to that, if we did decide on some low-hanging fruit, of course, we could put those forth as well, if we were in agreement.
right.
Yeah, I agree, Nikki. I think before we present to the board, depending on where we are, there may be things, that come up, 2 weeks before, and we want to discuss that or present it. So I don't think we should, say, this department has this timeline, because I think we still need to figure out our project plan and our overall goal. And each quarter, we should know when we're going to meet with the board, and then establish a week or two before what it is we want to discuss with the board or present if there are things to present. But there may be quarters that we don't have an actual suggestion, but we still want to provide them with an update on what we're working on.
I would agree too. I think that having some consensus on goals and approaches so that we're going in with a uniform kind of approach and looking for uniform information would be great, and probably just very settling for me, so I have a better sense of what I'm doing, I guess.
Also, can I suggest that, we began in January. We didn't, have a head start here. January was actually just getting to know each other. So January, February, March, that is the first quarter. I wouldn't mind reporting in April, because again, reporting within the quarter that we're still working, I don't think that they need that. I'd rather kind of head it out to So that I think we meet March 30th, and they will be meeting in like April 6th. So think of more reporting out an April 6th timetable rather than a March timetable, because
So are you saying the March timetable is, the March timetable on the 30th would be with recommendations, or would still be with just
30th we vote and 6th we
on,
present. Again, assuming that they will take us on April 6th.
okay, so what do we vote on the 30th?
Whatever
your
we're doing,
suggestion?
we don't know that yet. So we
No,
will,
I'm saying, well, okay, so there's two things. One is we're just reporting on our process. Are we doing that on the 30th, or are you
Nope.
saying by adding the additional time that we should then be ready for reporting on the process and our initial recommendations?
the 30th is our meeting with each other. And so just to solidify what it is we're going to present, that we know that that's our kind of getting ourselves, our ducks in a row meeting.
Is
And
that
then
whether or not it's recommendations?
Yeah, whatever it
or
is,
Just
we'll
process?
decide by then what it is.
Got it.
And then to see if can present on the 6th, and that will depend, of course, if they have room in their agenda for us to do so. How are people feeling about that as far as the time?
Do we want to push it to the 30th meeting?
I agree. I think it should be the quarter. We will meet during the quarter, and then the following month of the new quarter, we present or meet with the board. I think we should
Totally
have-
agree. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of the
At that.
month. And I mean, I agree with what a lot of people have said. I mean, process, I'm pretty confident that we'll have a fairly buttoned up process by then. And if there's some quick hits, low hanging fruit, like Celia said, then I'm sure everybody's all for that. But, to put it out there that we're going to have recommendations for specific departments and so forth, I think that's a pretty tall task right now.
Okay, so the 30th is what will be our date for reporting whatever we decide it is that we're going to report. Is that right?
It's kind of our internal meeting to decide what's going to be presented.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's how I have
Generally,
interpreted this
okay.
conversation. I'm on
Great.
board with that.
Okay,
that's how I
so
heard
we'll do that. And then we may want to give the select board a heads up. I can do that. I can report to Selectwoman Canfield that we're hoping to be on their agenda on the 6th and see what she says about timelines. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Do we want to do second quarter while we're here tentatively as a goal date?
Wouldn't we just want to, like, the last meeting of the quarter, discuss then what we would present, or,
So
discuss.
that would be,
That would be.
June 29th.
June,
and we have a meeting on that date, yes.
June,
Yeah.
yeah, we do. Yes, we do. Yeah.
June 29th, and that next meeting for them would be,
Should be
July
July
6th.
6th.
July
I
6th.
think, yeah.
all right, just so they know we're coming, hopefully, tentatively. All right, we're looking a little ahead, which is good. All right, we are back. Are there any other comments about these dates or timetables? No? Okay. All right, moving along. Discussion of a liaison with SPS DEI committee. I will open this discussion by saying that I did reach out to Superintendent Burkhead. We went back and forth a bit, and his suggestion very solidly was Miss Arnold. And that he believed that she is the absolute best person from that committee to be a liaison to this committee, and was very delighted that I reached out to him to ask for a representative to this committee. or liaison to this committee, excuse me, and has suggested Ms. Arnold, and she and I are supposed to have a conversation about it, and she's absolutely willing and excited to do that. So are there any comments or discussion on whether
Forgive
we
me for
should or should?
I'm sorry, Nikki, forgive me for my retention of names. Was
That's okay.
Miss Arnold one of the participants last time?
She is the assistant
No.
superintendent.
Oh, assistant superintendent. Okay,
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
All right.
Yes,
Nope.
she's the assistant superintendent for Scituate
I
Public.
guess this is what happens when you no longer have kids in the school
Yeah.
system. Okay.
She's the former principal of Jenkins as
Oh,
well.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Yeah, she was at Jenkins when we first moved to Scituate. So we had 3
Thank you.
kids go through Jenkins.
So can I ask,
Becky, I
so
think-
what would her role then be as the liaison then, specifically?
That's something to talk about. I know what I have in mind. Does anyone else want to chime in on this?
I'm
Well,
sorry, Bob, I didn't hear you. What would the role be?
What would her role be?
As it pertains to this committee?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. So, and I'm flipping back and forth, and I don't have my monitor because I'm in a hotel room right now with my family. But so there's an email that goes out every week from Principal McGuire from the high school, and in her newsletter, I think last week, no, I think it's Burkhead's email, Thursday Thoughts, if anybody gets that. And there was a mention that they had started a DEI planning response team, which was new to me. I hadn't heard that yet. So I sent Principal McGuire a note just asking what it was, who was on it, etc. And they mentioned that the team is made up of the assistant superintendent, who is Jen Arnold, and she is leading that group. So she's very connected to this stuff, as well as the district MECO director. And then there's also representation, K through 12 department chairs, curriculum coordinators, and also assistant principal Karen Hughes from the high school is also on the team. No students. That's a separate entity, which is, I think, is the anti-racism club. And we heard, from Celia, the other Celia, Reese, in our last meeting, as well as I think Jeremy Guyette. So just a little color. I didn't answer your question, Bob, but Jen Arnold is heavily involved.
My thought was to connect initiatives or recommendations that we have here with the school system, so that we aren't stepping on toes, being redundant, missing anything, and that we are informed and they are informed of one another's recommendations. And also maybe they provide us insight. So they are regularly reporting how what we're doing may be affecting those involved in the school system directly. So that was my idea. I can write it out as a formal description if you want.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
Nikki, let me just jump in just quick.
Go right ahead.
I personally think it's a great idea. And we've talked about this before. We heard the passion in our last meeting from a few of the students that actually went all the way into 8th grade, right? I mean, there was an 8th grader. She had her sister read her note, but still fantastic. And there is a lot going on in the schools, and that's where I have heard so many of the things that have gone on around hate and so forth, right? So, and it goes all the way into middle school, into high school, and having someone with, the firsthand information as opposed to relying on parents such as myself to say, hey, did you hear this happened? So having that ally, having that liaison, I think it would just really help our cause, I think, because ultimately, I think, as I've said before, it's the younger generation that I think is really going to hopefully propel us forward.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So any ideas on how we should proceed? I can make a suggestion that I have the conversation that I've already kind of set in motion with Miss Arnold, that we invite her to our next meeting, and that I write kind of a description of what this liaison would do, and see if she agrees with that.
And I wish more over here so that we know whether we have to discuss, vote this. And again, do we have to propose it to the Board of Select people, or can we just make this decision on our own? Again, this would be a non-voting member, but I don't know how much ability we have to decide that. I cannot see that they would have any problem with that.
Well, it's not a member, it's at all, voting or
Right, it's a
non-voting.
liaison.
It's really just a liaison, but
Yep.
I can certainly have a conversation with Maura about that.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I might add
Well,
it to my
if we took out the
conversation.
title liaison and just had it be somebody that came and offered a report to us once a quarter or however often we think, then
I would hope it would be, I love the name liaison with it, because I like that it's kind of formalized, that we have a back and forth relationship. Nikki, I just wrote up the liaison position will facilitate communications and connect initiatives between the school system and this town board.
I like that.
And I think we keep asking what the school's doing and we
Right.
don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
This gives it,
It's a single
a
point.
person who really knows, rather than, well, I think I heard that.
Yeah.
And I would love to have this position with us. I think
It's
it
a
makes us
single
stronger.
It's a single point of contact, as opposed to every time that we hear something's going on in the schools. Do we call Burkhead? Do we call McGuire? Do we call Karen Hughes? Now we just call Jen Arnold, right?
Right.
So it removes
And we ask
any
her,
ambiguity.
depending on, and we ask her, depending on what our conversation is, to bring friends. If there's something that comes up and we're like, well, since you're friends with Miss McGuire, you mind bringing her along? Or if since you're friends with, a certain counselor, do you mind bringing her to the next time you come? So yeah, she can, would you like to bring Superintendent Burkhead? We'd love to chat with him too, if he's available. I know he's busy, but I think it makes it very easy for us to have access to those people, to ask those questions, and to complete our work here, making recommendations, well-informed recommendations. All right, so let's add that to our next agenda. I will contact her. I will also talk with Ms. Select Person Curran about liaisons and how formal that process needs to be. And we should add this to, and whether we need it or not, we should add to the agenda discussion and vote, just to be sure.
Yep.
For the next meeting. All right, wonderful. Okay. Any other comments, questions, contributions? Next, sorry about my background noise. Next is a discussion and vote on the goals of the committee. So we have Miss Harriman, Reverend Stewart, and Miss Yassine. So we're gonna have you guys take it away.
Nikki, would you mind if I shared my screen?
Not at all. Please do.
Let's see if this goes. And then I probably need to make it larger, don't I?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, like, again, this is what I did last time, and it's like, how did I do that? Okay. What did I do last time that made that bigger, guys?
Do you have a Mac, Ruth?
No.
Oh, okay.
Can you go to 100%? See that 100%? And just click that
Where am I seeing 100%?
all the way up.
Right there.
Yeah,
Right,
oh,
you're almost there.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's
There you
exactly what I
go.
did to do. Yeah, 150. How's that?
Oh,
That's
good.
much better. Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I knew I did it before, I just can't remember how to do it again. We had a lovely discussion about these goals, and I really input from Kim and Natasha. And this started off with a goals discussion and ended up with a process discussion also. And I think that Tom's work on Excel is bringing some of that in. And I talked to Angela, and I think she's also interested in some process discussions. Because I think that that's one of the things we need to go forward is how do we do some of this? Rather than just have a conversation, it's the why of a conversation. So we started out with goals, and you guys had seen those before, and ended up with other sections, information gathering and analysis, observable goals, and then actions to meet these goals. And these sections in here would be the things people would be working on wherever they're working. And again, if I'm in, let's say, public safety, I could have lots of these for one goal. I might have more than one thing that I want to do, but it forces us to go through a process rather than thinking, ooh, this sounds like a good idea, let's do it. I need to gather more information first. What does it mean to do this? Are there costs involved? What do I have to know about this before I can really even make observable goals? And so that gets that information gathering and analysis first, setting up observable goals, things we can say, yeah, this will show that we've actually done this. And then what are those actions that are going to happen? All of this gets reported to the select board as our recommendation, because they need to know why we're recommending what we recommend. Because without this backup, I don't think that we are very compelling. So I'm hoping you guys had a chance to kind of look over the goals. They're very were originally presented, but I think it's a much smoother presentation. Kim and Natasha did a great job helping to wordsmith these into a better format. So goal 1 is, again, we talked about it so much in our first meetings, that community education and engagement piece. How do we make sure that our communities, and it really is a plural, because sometimes our community is the people in town hall. Sometimes our community is the people in minority communities within our town. Sometimes it's majority communities. There's so many different communities we can talk about, but that piece of community education and engagement is going to be important in any community we discuss. And so how does that look? What do we do with that? If we're going to plan something for them, okay, this is what we kind of take into account. Goal 2, the BIPOC representation for town employees. And it's hires, promotions, and decision-making processes get affected because you have these hires and promotions. So what do we need to look at? What do we want to target? And then what would have to happen? And we know that we have some constraints on this, but we've already started brainstorming things like, encouraging more information to people who might be interested then in taking the civil service exam. How do we get more people to sign up from Scituate? And then the third goal is ensuring that diverse communities within Scituate are served equitably. And I think that this is one of the ones that really brought many of us into this work, is to make sure that there is equitable treatment. And again, going through these pieces. Anything that's here, that's highlighted, that's in italics, was just brainstorming real quick off the cuff what it might be. When you're working on this, you're going to be putting your own things in. None of this stuff stays. It's just kind of like a template. And then you're going to decide, wait, I want to do this to meet this goal. Okay. And then you start filling things in on what you want to do. Kim, Natasha, comments?
No, I think I would just echo that it was a lovely experience working with the two of you and tossing around ideas. And I thank you, Ruth, for leading the charge on this. No, I think it's helpful to have some sort of template in terms of both literally and figuratively for how we proceed in our work together.
And I will just echo what both of you wonderful ladies have already said. I think this is hopefully a good way to frame out our work and lead us to more actionable steps in the end.
Yeah, thank you all for putting in the work here too. I read it, and I apologize, I tend to go in the weeds very quickly. So looking at it high level, if we're talking about generic, like goals for the committee, I almost see number 2 as a subset of number 3, because really number 1 is about community education, engagement, our culture in Scituate. And then the second piece goes even further into our charge about processes, budget, the systemic change, right? Like how do we change systems to make them more equitable? And one of the goals under that is really BIPOC representation for the town, because now we're talking about hiring, retention, advancement, and changing potentially or expanding on town processes, right? And I think if we do number 1 right and make Scituate, make everybody think about, oh, Scituate's an inclusive place, I want to move there, then that's only going to help Bob recruit people. If we're talking about Scituate residents have preference, like how are we going to recruit from a pool that is not diverse? So we need number 1 to get to the second goal, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you 100%. We did have a discussion on that because it's completely a subset of number 3. But it is such an important goal to me that I pulled it out as a for sure we have to do this piece, because I think it has so much impact on our town if we actually have people who work here. I mean, we think the schools, we think all layers of town government, boards, etc. I think that having people be part of the decision making makes a lot of difference in what kind of decisions get made. So I'm perfectly willing to collapse that into, one of the things you would do under number 3. But I pulled it out because I thought it was one of the most important things that we have to make sure we don't miss.
In some ways, I think you're saying the same thing, but I'd be curious, Celia, how you might address that structurally. Are you saying collapse it, or I'm just curious how you might deal with it.
Right. So if we're saying, one of our goals or charges is to make Scituate town processes and budgets, et cetera, more equitable, we have to take that, vertical by vertical or across departments, however we want to do it. And a big, huge one is, hiring and the advancement of town people, all of that. And so that would be one of the biggest buckets under that goal. But I also see what Ruth is saying, like it deserves to stand on its own. It could go either way. It's just, I don't want to bog us down if I'm not making sense.
Oh, you're making total sense.
Completely.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And yeah, and perhaps you have, in your role in the world, have experience putting these things together, certainly more than I do. And maybe it is a matter of how you organize this all around, because it's really hard to tease any of these out from the other. They're pretty intertwined.
And they're not, they're not really going to be sequential, right? I mean, I assume we'll be working on all 3 goals at the same time, maybe a little bit more focus on certain goals with certain departments than others. And, clearly hiring and recruitment is huge, but hiring ultimately will help us get where we want to go, but it's going to be a slow process, right? I mean, how often do we even have vacancies, right? I mean, and so we certainly don't want to wait on expanding an our diversity through recruitment and hiring before we hit these other goals, because it'll be a long time coming, you know, at the rate we turn over positions. So, but you know, so I mean, I think this is an incredible job. It was almost like, initially it was almost like all encompassing. It was almost like too much to even sort of to wrap our hands around. And I think that this is really helpful in sort of focusing the efforts. So this is great work.
I like your thinking, Bob, that it's not linear necessarily, and I wonder if we even organize it more as a flow chart, like a circle, because I don't know that there'll be an order, and everybody's going to continue to need to be engaged and educated, and they just do flow together in a non-linear way.
Yeah,
Kim,
Celia, when
I was
we
going to say, Kim, do you have a marketing background? Because I love it. I love the circle idea.
I think if my daughter, who's more of a business person, were here, she would be laughing hysterically right now.
I love it.
No, I'm a social worker with no business mind whatsoever.
But what do people think about? I mean, it's simpler if you get rid of number 2 and put it as number 3. You have lost nothing. And again, I know, Celia, you're going to be working on, and I hope that comes up later too, Nikki, as far as who's working on what. But Celia, you're going to be working on procurement. I mean, that's almost similar vein as far as the hiring. It just might be something that we have to include in our questions for us to be using. So doesn't hurt me. It doesn't hurt anybody to get rid of number 2 now that we've gone back and forth.
It doesn't hurt to get rid of number 2.
You can just understand that that will be part of number 3. Hiring is a piece that we would definitely need to be looking at in diverse communities.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get rid of it. I wonder, yeah, because you don't want to lose the language. It's just a matter of how it's organized, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I would, you know, when we first talked about it, this is what I said, but I thought number 2 should be number 3. They should switch places. And what I heard from Ruth and Kim at the time, which made sense to me, is that it is just such a big bucket, and that language is so important to make sure we have that clearly written in what we're doing, even though it's going to be a byproduct of kind of all the other stuff we're doing, and maybe the slowest one to actually achieve. That it was just so important. We needed to keep it in there and keep it in front of us. So that is our sort of big goal that's hanging out there.
Then I say leave it then. I think leave it, because in that sense, then in my mind it works, because then you have like 2 stakeholders, the community at large, like residents, which is number 1. Number 2 biggest stakeholders are town employees, right? So they each have their own individual goal, and then you get into the systems as a part of it and how my brain is working. So I think just leave it.
I think these goals are fantastic. I think what may be missing though is the support and validation piece. So we're educating the community and engaging the community, and we're hiring employees, and we're creating, you know, places where people have recourse should something happen. But I do think, and Ms. Harriman, you can maybe agree with me or flesh it out a bit better for me, but I do think there is a support piece that's missing here. So for instance, you make a complaint to the head of your department. They have a, you know, specific channel that they go through to address that complaint. And the complaint's been addressed, but the healing from the incident has not. And I don't necessarily mean that, you know, we have a fund that pays for therapy and massages and things that can be helpful when going through these things, but that we are cognizant of the damage that can be done by being overlooked, treated awfully assaulted or insulted or whatever.
Yeah. No,
I don't
agree.
know what that looks like.
Yep. And do you think, Nikki, that just falls under 3 though? And Ruth, would you mind scrolling down for 1 minute so we can see the bottom of 3? Or it's probably just the same.
Okay,
No,
because I think I have to,
there's 2 more bullets down there.
okay, see, I can see them and you can't. So
No.
I don't have it accurate. I have to make it a little bit bigger and then,
There you go.
oh, yeah, there, nope, I didn't see them either. Okay.
So I wonder, Nikki, if that would come under actions to meet these goals in part, that there's got to be a recourse. For instance, at the university where I work, there is a bias protocol. And once that system is activated, I wouldn't have necessarily gotten into, use Celia's word, gotten into the weeds with it here, but I wonder if that's a lot of what gets fleshed out as we go through this is, what does this mean? What's the actionable goal? So if we're going to have recourse, what is the recourse? And yes, I mean, if it would help to add the word support so that there's that in the response. I feel like I'm not really effectively stringing words together tonight, so forgive me if I'm not.
No, that's totally fine. I just think that, so there's like this cycle with this kind of thing where someone says something really awful, or that's taken in a really, really awful, hurtful way. Then we're working on what consequences, systems, or whatever we're going to use to address that. Inside of all of the fair employment laws, etc., recommendations from the governor's office, on and on. But there's a piece that we could do better than any other town, and that piece is a support piece, right?
And maybe a restorative justice piece.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I only am saying what I don't see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the solution for how to get there. But that's what I don't see. And I know that is a major part of progress, which is the healing from the incident or the situation or the repeated whatever. So what is that piece for us? Where does it fit in our goals? If you say it's in number 3, I believe you. These are fantastic.
I think it fits into number 3.
Yeah, it does.
It's not necessarily there yet.
Yeah.
But we need to add it.
Yeah, and I do wonder.
I think yeah. And
I do wonder how people feel about including language about restorative justice as a model for healing in our community. I think it's really, it's something we aspire to, again, at the university where I work, just trying to bring parties together and have them work through in a restorative way.
Yeah, it's a big word, so we'd have to say something, because these goals are public, about what that means.
Right. How does it work?
So even if it's a short few words, we need to say restorative justice, i.e., or creating what, I don't know, however you can possibly condense restorative justice, I don't know. But if we're going to use a big term, we're going to have to say what
we have to
what we're talking about.
We have to, yes, break it down.
And the example that you would use, Nikki, you would imply that it was almost a discrimination or harassment claim that happens in the workplace, right? So, and so much of this, some of this anyways, will ultimately be driven just by policy. And so there's some work that we really have to do in that regard. So, and some of it may be able to be addressed in that manner, but again, much of it may not be able to be formalized in a policy, right?
I agree with that. I do. I think some things happen are not in the workplace.
Right.
So there are some things that happen within the community, say, that affects the community. And I know this is a discussion about goals specifically, but I also have had side conversations with community members about our charge and why we would look at certain things and discuss certain things or even deal with certain things. And I think we have two things. We need to analyze how the town operates and make sure that that's equitable. But I also think the charge is expansive enough to include healing and creating a community that is open and supportive and welcoming to those who may traditionally not feel welcomed here. And that includes a lot more than what Mr. Clark is doing in the kind of already set in stone, not exclusively, but mostly set in stone employment piece. There are people who aren't necessarily employed by the town, but do work for the town or volunteer for the town or even just participate in community events. They're major pieces of different initiatives or whatever, but we have to broaden what we're thinking in terms of what our charge is. I think, my opinion is this, that this committee was made to make living in Scituate easy for anyone. Like it should be anywhere, which it's not, we know that. But here, it's our attempt to make it easy living for everyone. And to do that, when these things happen, they're so incredibly damaging that there has to be a parachute or, net for the mental and emotional piece that comes from the incidents that we all know what we're talking about. So,
Nikki, can I propose something and as an addition to number 3?
yeah.
Because, again, I'm hoping you can see this part here, about who experience discrimination or harassment. So again, we've got the initiating incident that's causing trauma, have recourse. And again, we keep thinking of that as something you can do about it, somebody you can go tell, somebody who will make a difference about it. What about have recourse and support? I'd rather not name restorative justice as the support they're going to have, because I don't know if that's always going to be the term or the right thing that needs to happen at that moment. But that when we start building some of these things up that we want to see, that we add in support systems to help support people who have had these experiences.
Yeah, I would also add incidents based in bias or experience incidents based in bias. I don't know.
Okay, instead of
Almost
discrimination or harassment, you want to say experience incidents based in bias?
No, I mean, I think discrimination and harassment need to be there. Those are legal terms.
Right.
Right.
So okay, discrimination, harassment, or incidents based in bias?
Yeah, I like that. That's better.
Or incidents resulting from bias?
Well, yeah. Which stronger?
I like resulting from.
Okay. Yeah. 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 That's better. Okay. Apparently I like the reach too, Miss Risha.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point in time, there's either further discussion or a movement to accept this as amended.
Well, okay, so now we've done this here in 3. I know. I'm belaboring the point.
Because
But do we need to, I'm just saying, 2.
Sorry, I thought you wanted me to go back up to.
No, I did. I just thought we went too far. So in
There's
2,
3.
There's 3, and then in 2, increase diversity with Scituate hire. So this is very town employee specific.
Yes, it is, because that's what we have control over.
Right. Okay, we've kind of resolved that. So let's go up to 1 and be sure. Move beyond tolerance. Okay. Okay. I mean, I don't know, with the goal of uplifting and supporting the voices of those underrepresented in our community. Something, because we're engaging people, but why? Like,
So well, I guess the question
what
is,
are we
do you
teaching
want
them?
to reword this now, or do you want to take another look at this and come back and vote, recommend an amendment for next time?
I think we should vote as it is, and then I think we should leave it as, we should put it in our Slack file and come back to it as need be as we move through this process. But it does look very good, and I would say if anyone else has any comments, we might be ready to vote on them.
Yeah,
Right, as they
don't we
stand.
have the option of voting to accept with revision?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the only revisions I've made since from what you've seen
Yeah.
are the or incidents resulting from bias, have recourse and support.
Mm-hmm.
So this as amended would be the motion.
that we would
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
All right, I will, if there's.
Wait, Nikki,
yeah,
sorry,
go right
before we
ahead.
proceed, so we're voting on just the goals. We're not, because we haven't really delved into all the italics and everything underneath them, correct? We're just saying 1, 2, and 3, not like the A, B, Cs.
You can choose. So
You can
I
make a
would-
motion to say, yeah, you can make that motion if you'd like, Ms. Risha.
Yeah, I would move to do that because we haven't, in thinking that everything in italics is just proposed for consideration right now. I don't know if we've thought through everything that would fall there quite
Right.
yet.
So I guess the italics actually don't really count because they're just suggestions. What
We
counts
just
is,
put them in to give like examples so that you kind of knew what we were talking about. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It was just sort of just for a frame of reference to what we were considering information gathering and analysis.
but what's the idea is that you would then use the information gathering to actually like, oh, I think I want to work on something under community education. I think that we need to, figure out how people are feeling about DEI in town, and I want to gather more information about that. How would I do that? Why would I want to do that? What are some of my goals of gathering that information? That I'd be able to report stuff out. And then what would I need to do? I would need to send out a questionnaire to all town members. I don't think we can actually do that, and that would be your action to meet those goals. So you're kind of justifying what would you do and why would you do it.
Okay.
And so none of the italics is anything that what you have to do.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
what, if you want to do a very specific motion, Ms. Risha, I will entertain that.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so I need a motion. Is anyone interested in making, is there further discussion? Is anyone interested in making a motion for the approval of the goals?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Oh, you have to actually say it.
Motion
Yeah, to,
to vote on the goals.
okay,
as amended.
as amended.
As amended, yes.
Okay, we need one person to say all of that and then a second. In one. So here, let me give you the language. I move that we approve the
You
goals.
can actually do it, Nikki.
Can I?
Yes.
I
I
had to leave the
I
roll
went through
call.
that training,
Okay.
Nikki. You can do it.
All right, so I move that we approve the goals as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you,
That's easy.
Vice Chair Secor, and I will call the roll. Oh, I'm a roll. Hold on. Miss Dre,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Miss Yassin,
Yes.
Miss Risha,
Yes.
Miss Harriman. Oh, you're muted, Miss Harriman.
So sorry. Yes.
Okay, and I also vote yes. Okay, so our goals are approved. And that means that Ms. Yassin will deliver them as amended to Ms. Dre, and it will be a part of our Slack record. Good. And also part of our minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Great. All right, moving on. Discussion and vote on questions to ask town board/committees. Mr. Clark, Ms. Risha, myself, Vice Chair Secor, and Ms. Silvera. Would anyone like to begin this discussion?
Well, I know there were preceding discussions. I mean, I can show, I mean, I'm not sure if it makes sense before I kind of show the spreadsheet that I really just kind of put together to try to gather the information and maybe provide a tool for people to use. But I know there were discussions with between Bob and maybe Celia and maybe yourself, Nikki, that I wasn't privy to prior to that. I don't think we're going to be in a position to vote on this tonight. I think this will be a discussion.
But I'd like to see what we do with it. I think it's, I love it, Tom. I think it was a great bite of this because again, we have so much we talk about and then we don't know what we're going to do with it. I know I have some suggestions on some of the question wording, some redundancies, things that I think are asking the same question a different way.
Oh yeah, there's definitely redundancy. So
but I don't want us to.
So yeah.
I don't want. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, no, I've spent some time with it today, and I really like it a lot. But I don't think I don't really want to discuss all of it.
No.
The next 45 minutes. So.
Maybe the way we should approach it is to get each of, and I was not a part of, I was a part of the communications, but I wasn't necessarily part of the meetings that were in discussions. Maybe we can get everyone's, get some insight from each of these people on their thought process for this task. I think that might be helpful. Ms. Silvera, do you want to kind of give us what your thoughts are and then we'll kind of go around? You're muted, by the way, Ms. Silvera.
Which part exactly?
Well, just the process of creating, I guess, creating the document that Vice Chair Secor circulated.
Do you want me to share it briefly, just so people know what we're talking about?
If you feel, are we ready to
Yeah.
share? I think it's a good thing to work from.
I can just show you, and then
Okay.
I think this also ties into Angela and the whole Slack thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because
Yeah,
I'm
wonderful.
still, and I held a question there because I'm still unclear of if we were to use this document, you know, would individuals just kind of put their updated copies up there or what have you? But I'll just share it. Let me see if I'm successful doing this. Hang on.
Well, as you're doing that, no, I don't think that we put our updated copies there. I think that we look at it, we discuss it, and once you've kind of told us what your thought process is, then we discuss it here and then, you know, make corrections here and then place it into Slack. Now, we can do that before we make corrections as well. We just have to kind of bring it back to meeting and talk about what we want to change with it. So,
So let me just briefly discuss this. So
Can you
So-
possibly make it bigger, Tom?
yeah,
Thanks.
so just move this around a little bit. Can I?
I hope that wasn't a trick question.
No, I mean usually I have the percent thing here. Hang on, I gotta
Yeah.
change.
yeah, where'd that go?
There we go.
There we are.
Thank you. Oh, there we go.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. So all I did here, so this is just a multi-tab spreadsheet. And so these were the previous goals that I received prior to obviously what we just discussed. So this would be updated with what we just talked about. So just to kind of level set, you know, as people are going through, if they were to use a tool like this for, you know, their vertical departments, and they wanted to kind of, you know, baseline themselves back to the goal. So that's all this initial tab is. The next tab, so I'm going to have to increase this, right? If you guys can see this. So this was very stream of consciousness, right? So we can kick this language around, maybe not tonight, but at a later date. But this was just as, and I can already see it misspelling. But anyways, this is what I would just call kind of norms and approach, so that we're, I think, consistent with how we meet with people, with how we approach our various discussions. A lot of this was around, you know, right out of the gate, the last thing we want to do is create an adversarial relationship with our counterparts in town. That can come later if it's warranted. Hopefully it's not. But the whole idea is to build trust and bring them along with us, right? So the more allies we have in town, and I just think the more fruitful the various discussions are going to be. Building relationships is vital. You can see some of the other things that I wrote here, which we can get into. Target dates, action items, and you know, I saw that was a big focus in the 3 goals. There's always action items. There's observable goals. There's metrics where they make sense. Measurable goals where it makes sense. So that's really just the first 2 tabs. And then I'll focus on public safety because Celia dove deep, right? So each of the tabs, if you guys can see this, each of the tabs has general questions. And this is, I'm sure, where a lot of the redundancy is, because I kind of took this from one of the documents from either last meeting or the meeting before. But so a lot of general questions. You know, here's where you can put your answers. I can build something like this in just about any, you know, type of. I could probably do this in Google Docs, no problem. Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, whatever. I do a lot of this stuff in my day job. So here's all the general questions going down. And then you'll get further down and there's department specific questions. So, and because Celia had gone deeper with public safety, that's why I'm just kind of showing this as an example. And then just further down, and I'm not going to blow this up because it's redundant. It's just the general questions. The specific questions down here I haven't built out yet. Each individual would be responsible for that. Culture and rec. And I'm probably missing a few, but hopefully you guys get the idea. And I'm going to stop the share.
So, yes, go right ahead, Lucia.
Okay, so maybe I can add some, because I was a little confused, but a lot of those questions, obviously being a town hall employee, I can answer those, right?
Yeah.
And then also, I did speak to our IT support, and he did say he can create surveys that he can send out to all of the town hall employees and obviously make that anonymous so more people would want to answer. So that's a part of it if we want more people to answer those questions. I mean, obviously I can answer for my department, and I feel like I can answer for town hall specifically, but for, you know, other areas, maybe we can send out that, you know, that anonymous survey, which he said that he would be happy to do. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. I know that I think Ruth said something about surveys. So I wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that would be hugely helpful. I mean, yeah, I mean, across department, yeah, a lot of the general questions they're repeated, right? But if we can, you know, two birds, one stone, and to get all that information through yourself, through Bob, I think that's hugely helpful, so that we have the general stuff, and then we can start going deeper. And I think the specific questions will vary depending on department.
And like you mentioned, it's very important how we approach people. We have a lot of very hardworking, good people
Sure.
that, you know, if we approach the right way, obviously we can get a wealth of information and, you know, build alliances, but we also need to make sure we approach them with tact, because everyone is, you know, here doing the best they can. I'm here and I feel like I work with good people. Yes, we need training. There's lots of things. I felt like I was walking into 1993 when I came here, full of great people. And I think it's important that we're tactful in our approach. We reach not in a, I've had conversations with people who obviously work here. And, you know, we certainly don't want to go about it in an accusatory way. It's more of, we want to, you know, obviously, you know, thank them for all of the great work, because I do work in town hall and oftentimes we're overworked and certainly underpaid. And obviously we want to make sure that when we are approaching people, we let them know how hard they're working, and the other changes, you know, the changes that hopefully we're trying to make that will benefit all of us as a whole. So it's just in how we approach folks, because I have my little discussions on the side, and you know, some people don't know what we're here for, and I want everyone to know that we're here for the greater good. It's not going to affect you in any way negatively. So yeah, I mean, those are the conversations that I had with certain people, and I want to ease them into wanting to be a part of this mission.
Lucia, I agree with you. Thank you for saying that. And I think too, that's like when we start these meetings, we always state like our norms. And one of them is like, you know, assume good intentions. And I think that's how we have to approach this. Like there's not an enemy here, and that's not the way to make change. And I do think part of the process, not to speak for you, Tom, but at least for me, which is why I was so glad to see the spreadsheet, is I felt like different emails were flying under through people, of course, with like emailing some departments and some questions out. And I just think we should be very organized and approach the process in a very, I'm repeating myself, in an organized way. So we're not going to the same department and same staff over and over again and peppering them with questions, because a lot of even the general questions that are in there, Lucia, Mandy, or Bob could address for us. So if we agree on what those general questions are, utilize the three of you as our liaisons to the town too, get those out of the way, so then we don't go to them for the same exact information, and then focus our meetings with them on a different discussion. And I have to say something, because I went, again, way in the weeds on public safety, because that was my first assignment. I didn't know what to do. But I think while we should discuss an approach for each department that's pretty uniform, I do think public safety needs to be approached differently. And that needs to be a conversation about building trust. We do have a new police chief, and starting the conversation of just like, how can we help, period, right? Like, what can we do together? You know, Mandy, not to put you on the spot, but we have you on the committee, and like, make sure you're a part of that dialogue, because I think peer-to-peer relationships, so an officer to an officer, is more likely to affect change than me going to an office. You know what I mean? So I think we just need to be thoughtful about the whole process here. And that's what I think this Excel was trying to start.
Yeah, can I just add, you know, I agree with everything that's been said. I think you just really want this process to be as productive as possible. And I think that has a lot to do with how it's approached initially. I think a fair amount of time really needs to be spent with, you know, when you sit down with the department head, explaining the goal of the committee, what we're really ultimately trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
You know, I think, again, as others have said, I think we have to be careful and make sure that the process doesn't come across as sort of accusatory or too. It's more of a sort of a process, getting the departments to sort of understand what the ultimate goal. I mean, as a Board of Selectmen mandated goal, right? To increase our sort of you know, our reach, right? And really and working with different departments to get them to a sense of like how we can help them, like what are their own goals in this regard, and what can the committee do to kind of, you know, to help them reach those. You know, I think as much as possible, if we can get the sort of general information to you guys beforehand. A lot of it we have, so we don't have to be redundant. I can give you all the diversity statistics. I can give you information on how we do recruitment, and I can, you know, what trainings we've provided. So when you do sit down with the department head, you're really getting into what happens within that department. And, you know, and I think you're going to have a real sort of diversity of opinion. I mean, if you sit down with someone who runs the highway and grounds division, they're going to have a lot less sort of experience with providing training and diversity related services than the library may have, right? So, you know, so I think it's just really important to sort of bring them along and make sure that they understand that we're sort of partners in this, and that's ultimately my concern. I just don't want it to come across in any way as sort of accusatory or judgmental of what they may have, you know, what has been lacking in the past, because I think the town, you know, we've been sort of behind the times in this regard, I think. So what can we do moving forward is really what the focus should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Clark, and thank you, everybody that has been working on this. I mean, I think in terms of the town, our goal is information gathering and assistance, right? So maybe that's part of our elevator speech, Vice Chair, C-cards, information gathering and assistance.
And
That's
some
what we're
of the
here for.
other, oh, I'm sorry, Nikki. Some of the other language you use at the beginning, Celia was referencing it earlier, is that everybody starts in a different place. And I agree that I think that a tone of calling people in instead of calling people out is really, it's just been building alliances, that we are all in this together. And hard to imagine from the little I know about this group that anybody would be off-putting in that way.
Right. So I have a suggestion, and I've been thinking about this in terms of, you know, where I can be most helpful. Maybe there was a suggestion by you, Ms. Harriman, that we invite people to this meeting and have a discussion. I do like your comment, Mr. Clark, that we receive some information about the department that we're meeting with prior to meeting with them. I would like to, and I have already met with some department heads just because of doing stuff in the community. But I think I would like to have a conversation with whichever departments we decide to go with first, their department heads, and tell them what to expect when, invite them formally. I like handwritten notes to attend a meeting with us, and let them know some of the things that we're doing and give them basically a heads up into what our mission is now that we have goals and all of that other stuff. I do think it's important that they fill out whatever it is informational survey that we're creating. I think that's absolutely important to hear in their voice their answers. And I think it draws us closer to who they are and how they run their department. And I also think that, being invited into a group with knowing you already have someone that you've made a connection with on the committee can be very helpful. So I am willing and would like to do that for whatever groups we decide to go first for each quarter, and then bring them into our full committee meeting for whatever presentation we'd like to ask them to do. So how do we feel about the questions that we're asking initially? So the information gathering, I feel like there's two sets. So there's information gathering questions that you put up, Vice Chair. How do we feel about those kind of same, oh yes, Lieutenant O'Shea.
I just have a quick question. So
Yeah.
I just want, so are we having the department heads come speak to this group as well as going to gather information from them, or is it like a one?
I think it's all one process. We're trying to develop what is the process. Some of the things that I've heard that we want is we want a presentation to the full group. We want questions answered and information based on questions that we want, initial information that we want, right? And then we have like specific questions by department, right? Yes, Ms. Risha.
Or I think, so maybe I confused what I was suggesting as the process too, because I think to Lieutenant O'Shea's point, I think maybe if, for the sake of time, whoever is assigned to whatever departments, once we have the generic set of questions that Bob, Lucia, and Mandy can help us with, we got those answers, then we need to dig deep and think, all right, what other questions would we want answered? Again, work with them. I think we could all meet under 3 people with, whoever the department head is, meet with them informally, get some information, establish a working relationship, and then come back to the group and we can decide, okay, we need more information from the head of whatever department, rather than putting them up so it feels like a hearing almost, like to answer our questions.
That's what we're trying not to do, right? That's what we're trying not to do. And to have them see that this is an ongoing thing, because I'm anticipating that one of the recommendations that we have is that, quarterly or the first quarter, you have your department head visit this group. The second quarter, another department head comes to visit this group, and there's an update based on whatever recommendations we make in our initial year. That's my anticipation of how this is going to go.
Because Nikki,
So-
I always figured that it might just kind of flow a little more organically, depending on things that we're pulling out from our different departments. That there might be something that people decide to do with the police department one time, and with the schools another time, and with something the other time. That we wouldn't necessarily keep our recommendations in a quarter.
No, well, I don't necessarily think that we should do that, but we have to have some initial ones. So my thing is, we don't have any information gathered as we're sitting here. The only people that have the most information are Mr. Clark, Ms. Silvera, and Lieutenant O'Shea, right? And they don't have answers to the questions that they've even created yet because they haven't been asked. So we need information. That's like step 1, right? information gathering is step one. And I think that happens in two parts. One, we agree on the generic questions that were created by the group, or we change them or amend them. And step two, we then have the department head and whomever the department head would like to come with them, come and have a conversation with us.
I always saw that, no, I saw that as that we would talk with them. And again, nobody's going anywhere these days, but that,
Right.
that, you know, one or two of us then has a discussion with that department head to kind of work through those questions rather than just giving somebody a form to fill out.
I
Well,
agree. I think the subcommittee, if it's a subcommittee that's working with that department, like Celia said, meet with the department head. I think we can do that, you know, outside the full group.
We're not there yet.
But
We're-
isn't that, Nikki, in the information gathering stage?
No.
Why
No.
wouldn't it be?
Because there's some basic information I'm assuming this group came up with that we should have about the department before we set the kind of more detailed questions that we'd like to ask. For instance,
Couldn't meeting with the department head help you find those more detailed questions? Like having the conversations, building the rapport with the folks that you're going to be working with. And I see this as long-term. We have a 2-year commitment.
Exactly.
We have large goals here.
Right.
So I think, starting small and, I didn't work with any of the small groups, but I heard that they were very productive.
Right, they look like
if we stay less than the quorum, like, the three people, I think you can get on a phone call, or Zoom or whatever. But I think
I agree with that. But I think there's some initial information gathering that we need to do. And the question is how to do that. Is what you're saying that we're asking all these questions at the same time? For instance, all the generic questions and then okay, good. So there's two parts here, right? There's two parts here. The first part is the initial kind of everybody's getting basically the same question. The feeler, give us some information for us to digest on your department, right? Then I'm saying the next step is to ask the department head plus whomever else would like to come to have a conversation with us. Then I'm saying we then, after collecting initial information, have a second set of questions that the subgroup goes and works through with this department. Do you see?
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a great deal of information gathered in different ways before we get into the more specific questions for individual departments. That's what I'm saying.
Where I'm hearing the pushback to that plan, Nikki, is the idea of calling the department heads and whoever they want to bring with them in front of the full board in this format where it's recorded and live and anyone can come listen. I think that what I'm hearing from everyone is that they would feel more comfortable having a more private conversation about difficult topics where it wouldn't feel as intimidating to the department heads because they're not being, trotted out in front of the entire town, for lack of a better way of saying
You
it.
froze. I missed a few words, but anyway, you froze for a second.
Oh, I said, I was just saying, I think that people would feel more comfortable not bringing everybody in, the department heads and everyone in front of the full board where it's being recorded live and where anyone can watch. And that they would rather have those conversations more privately off camera, so to speak, so that, because they're hard conversations and people might just be more comfortable to speak more freely. So I think we agree about the kind of information that needs to be gathered. Like we need to do some initial information gathering with the people here, Bob and Lucia and Mandy, and get all those general questions answered. And then I think we agree that we need to go to the department heads, but I think what I'm hearing everyone say is that they would feel more comfortable doing that, not in this format, because that feels intimidating to the department heads.
This format initially is not for specific questions. It's for them to tell us about their department, you know, in a more public setting. So we're collecting initial information from the department heads, right? And then we can invite them. They do not have to come, right? There's always, we can't make it and I'd rather not. That is an option. And
Right,
then
but then
we
that
invite
puts them
them,
on the spot. When they say no, that reflects badly. Do you know?
which is why you have a one-on-one, three-on-one, whatever conversation that says, this is not, you're not being judged by whether you say yes or no. It may not be the right time for this particular department, whatever it is. But what we get for information, we'd like them to basically tell us in this meeting, because it's publicized, right? And the initial information that we receive is fairly generic for each department, right? We're getting what's going on in that particular department. And they can present it, or the subgroup people can present with them, or whatever. Then we delve deeper in our subgroups, we have conversations, we go back and forth, we have second, third, whatever, as we make our way to our recommendations. And then perhaps you present with your subgroup also, after we get through the more specific questions, your recommendations. So it's a two-part process. One, we're asking you a bunch of questions, we're asking you to come in and, you know, basically present your answers to those initial questions, to the initial questions, the generic initial questions, right? Two, and we can have a conversation with people before they even show up. You're not on trial here. It's simply telling the public what's going on in this particular department. There's no judgment, because we're here to assist to make things right that may not be quite right and whatever, right? And then two, then we get into more in-depth conversations, 3-on-1, 2-on-1, whatever our groups are divided as, about departments with maybe not even the department head. Maybe they already have a specific person that deals with this, right? We don't know yet. We have to find that out. Like if we go to the cultural and recreation department and they're like, oh, well, you know, this person always deals with, you know, Chinese New Year. I'm making this up, right? So then we're like, oh, that's a good person to talk to. Let's draw that person in. But we don't even know if that exists until we ask the initial questions. I think it's absolutely fine to ask initial questions of the department, to have initial conversations, and to invite them to this meeting, because they should feel comfortable here. They should, you know, understand the process as we develop it that is to be expected when they come to this meeting. You know, they should be keeping track of, you know, what they think might be of interest to people in this meeting. We have to continue to incorporate, participate, whatever. That being said, and we need to vote on this because we need to move forward. That being said, are we good? Let's see what we can get nailed down. How do we feel about the generic questions that were presented?
I think they need work.
What'd you say?
I think they need work.
Yeah, I
Okay.
do too.
Okay. Okay.
I think they're
So-
close, but they need
Yeah,
work.
I think they're very solid, and I think that they do need work. So should we, okay, is everybody in agreement that we should take another look at these questions, the generic questions? Okay, good. Lots of head shaking. Number two.
Well, the question is, how are we going to do that, Nikki? I mean, do you want to
We're gonna
again get
do
a small group?
Right, we're gonna do two things. One,
Okay.
we're gonna take Tom's document, sorry, Vice Chair Secor's document, and
You
give
can
it
call
to
me Tom.
Angela.
Yeah.
I know, I do call you Tom, but you know, we're supposed
I
to
know
be,
you do.
we're supposed to be formal, Tom.
No, we don't have to be formal now. I just have to be
I'm
formal.
I'm sorry,
in my
Chairwoman.
I know. I feel familiar enough for you to call you buddy. I don't know why. But anyway, we could give it to Angela and she can put it so we can all see it. And then we can come back to this meeting, having read it, thought about it, whatever, with our suggestions and comments. I think we're very close. I think there's a lot of questions. That's number one. I mean, yes, Lucia, are you trying to say something?
My own. What better folks to ask some of those questions that I read than employees, right? I mean, we can have a policy in place. It's only as good as its enforcement, right? So, I mean, so a lot of those questions I can answer myself. Oh, do we have something in place? Maybe, but is there something actively being done? More than likely, no. And if we do have this resource in terms of maybe having an anonymous town employee survey, those folks can answer those questions, I think, more effectively than.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. I don't think it just needs to be department heads answering. I think they should also answer it, but I agree with you. I think it needs to be, you know, employees as well. And I think that I feel like the questions that we're close to getting together will serve as a guideline or maybe a cheat sheet for whoever comes to present to us. This is the sum total of what we need right now. If you have extras, let us know. Otherwise, come and tell us what we've been talking about or the results of your answers, right? So if you're sending Public Works a list of surveys, the IT person's going to send it out to Public Works. They're then going to send it to who's in charge of Public Works, Ms. Silvera and whoever else. They're going to put all those answers together and see some trends and report to us with someone from Public Works. We did our initial questions. We have surveyed initial employees, and here's what came back. And we're noticing a trend that this, and we see that there's a trend that this, and we're going to go back and ask, you know, further questions and have further conversations. It's a conversation. It's always a conversation. And sometimes it's good to have that conversation in a public setting. This is not a committee that has more than, I think, 10 minutes, is it, Ms. Justine, of public comment?
It's
right?
whatever you decide, Madam Chair.
Ruth, you run everything. So
No.
it's just kind of a joke. And you do it
Whatever
very
you
well.
have to.
You do it very well. So my thing is that we need to continually have conversations and not shy away from public conversations, but we need to have them first with department heads and whatever employees they want to bring in that they think might be helpful to the conversation. So I think that should be part of ongoing conversations, should be part of the process. Let's put this into Slack. Let's come back. I don't feel like we're ready to vote, like we're not all solid on these questions. Let's put this in the Slack. Let's add this to the next agenda. But we absolutely need to vote the next time on initial questions and to any further comments on any of the documents that we put in tonight need to kind of be wrapped up at the next meeting. Yes, Reverend Stewart.
I just think that the working groups did a good job and really nailed down a lot of stuff. And I think if we put this into Slack and we all think about it and try to have a discussion, it's just going to take forever. And I think it would be nice to sort of kick it back to Tom and the other people that worked with you, Tom, to nail that down for us a bit more and be able to have a more a shorter conversation. And if the rest of us have ideas or suggestions, we can send them an email.
We can send it to Tom, for instance.
Yeah, that's what I was going to recommend is that I can put it up on Slack either way, right? So I can put attachments up there.
That's correct.
You guys have a look at it.
Should we vote on this and then make amendments if need be next time?
No, I'm not ready.
No.
You could, but I don't think anybody would vote yes at the moment.
Okay.
And then if you have, you guys can look at it on Slack. You have suggestions, send me an email.
And we'll add this to the next agenda, please.
Send me an email, and then I'll have, I'll grab Celia and whomever else wants to have a, sidebar, less than a quorum meeting.
I'd like to be involved in that, Tom.
Fantastic. And we'll get it to a point where it'll be votable.
That sounds great, because again, maybe one of the things we can do with the with what you're putting together with your questions is questions that will be answered by, initial first round through by, again, our resources.
Totally agree.
Right. I would
That sounds
say,
awesome.
I would add that when you're looking at the questions, that there be at least one open-ended question, like seriously open-ended, like, I don't know, what is diversity in your department? Something way open-ended. And I think when you do those types of questions, you get a strong sense of a department, but also a strong sense of what's going on. So I would suggest that you have, and that you not have as many questions. It's not even a lot of questions, but you can get answers that you need, or that you maybe don't even expect by doing open-ended questions. And I think any survey we send out, we should have a statement. I don't know if you want to work on this too, at the top of the survey that says these questions are directed to the charge of this committee, and are not, all the things we talked about tonight are meant for gathering information and assistance with these goals. Something short like that, so that it's understood and in writing that these aren't for, causing any trouble. We're just simply trying to figure out, what's going on and provide any kind of recommendation or assistance we can. So a statement like that, along with the questions, would go, I think, a very long way. Okay, any other comments about the questions? Yes, Ms.
Yes,
Risher.
I think so. Maybe since we're going to have a sidebar and, fine tune some of these generic questions and processes weaved into that. So maybe we can take a stab at, structuring the questions and the steps of who to ask when, who to meet with when, all of that. And we can work with Bob and Lucia on that as well. So we'll come to the next meeting with the proposed step-by-step process.
Okay, I don't know that that's necessary, but I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Awesome.
So
I accept the challenge.
right, and I'm sure you will definitely do awesome. All right,
Awesome.
are we ready to send this to Slack?
Almost. I
Almost.
have to make a few changes. It'll get up there tonight or tomorrow morning.
Awesome. Okay, but it's heading in that direction.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, the youth subcommittee and the subcommittee on hate crimes. Let me talk a little bit about each of these, since they're kind of my brainchild. I think that you can tell a lot about a community through its children and their actions. And I think that our children have more than alerted us that there is discord at a minimum in our community. And unfortunately, in our nation and the world, but there certainly is here. The presentation that we had, where we asked some of the younger members of our community to present to us, not only did they do a phenomenal job, they illuminated a gap, need, concern, an urgency for having a tiny bit more access to people that can make change. Yes, there is a school committee DEI, and there's an anti-racism group, which I think would be a fantastic place to draw a youth group member from, whatever we decide. But I do think that's a voice that needs to be heard. That being said, this particular community needs a vehicle to place, put, support, change, make, and structure how to deal with incidences based in bias as well as hate crimes. The police force, it's not their primary job. They're very restricted to what the law is. That's why we have them. So their limitations are very understood, and we definitely absolutely need them. But to prevent our melting pot from boiling over, I think that there needs to be an alternate vehicle for placement of concerns, reporting, etc. That is not exclusively tied to the hate crimes laws and statutes, but that goes beyond to illuminate incidences when they happen, offers a place for people who are the victims of these things to present and discuss what happened to them, and allows the community to see and understand very closely what's going on. A lot of times the victims don't come forward. They can be groups of people. It can be one person, but they don't come forward because there's no place for them to come forward to. So they disappear into the background of things, and all we hear about is the person who caused the injury. And we don't even really hear about them. If it's a child, we don't really hear about them. So I want to take, I know we're kind of, I try and stop after 2 hours, but I know we're a bit over. But I do want to take some time to talk about this. If we're not voting on it tonight, it's fine. But I do want to hear from the committee their thoughts on these two types of groups. And is there a need for them? Would they be helpful? Etc. So I will, does anyone want to jump in or go first?
I think that we don't have the information we need right now to make a decision as to if this would be helpful or not. And I think we have to play out the rest of our process before we know what, I mean, maybe this is exactly what we need and that's great, but I don't feel like, at least I personally, have enough information about what the current processes and policies and mechanisms are that already exist are for these things. And if there's just a way that we could improve something in town that already exists, or if we really do need to recommend that the town creates new things.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Reverend Stewart. Do you think whatever's in place now, if there's anything, is working?
Can we get clarity on which we're talking about? Because we have two different things set up as far as a youth subcommittee and a subcommittee on hate crime. So can we limit it to one discussion at a time? Because I'm having a real hard time taking notes in two different places.
Okay,
plus
so
the discussions going back
are you
and forth,
talking
and I
about
don't really know.
the hate crimes committee, or are you talking about the youth committee? Reverend Stewart.
Well, I thought you were talking about both, so I was kind of speaking at large to both.
So yeah, that's fine.
That I just don't, I honestly, I'm not trying to be rude. I really don't have a good handle on what is in place. And so it's really hard for me to say if it's working or not. I think probably we wouldn't all be sitting in this meeting right now if it was working. So I see that as a huge step. But I wonder if there's way of, I don't completely know everything that exists already in town, because I've only been here a couple years, but I wonder if there are things that if it could just be a recommendation that they improve how they function rather than reinventing the wheel. And that's, for me, that's information I don't have. So I don't feel I can speak to how well truly they're functioning or not, or even how we would recommend to make improvements if they do exist. And so for me, it's part of this information gathering process to better understand what exactly we do need.
And it feels, if I could be so bold. It feels like a big topic to open up at this stage of the meeting. I don't know how others feel, or if this is just my own fatigue.
That's okay.
But I just wonder how others, I'm
Okay,
I'm
why
worried.
don't we just,
I
why
wonder
don't we
what- I
just take
worry-
initial impressions and include in your initial impressions whether or not we should pick it up at our next meeting?
I would like to pick it up at the next meeting. Brief commentary specifically around the youth subcommittee is that I do think we need a youth voice. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to manifest itself. I think including the liaison, so Assistant Superintendent Arnold, I think is a really good step, and we talked about that a while ago in this meeting. I'd like to get her opinion on this, frankly, as far as the youth, but I know that there are a lot of engaged youth, and we need them to be a part of this. I'm just not sure how yet. I think it's going to take a bit more time to figure that out.
Anyone else?
For me,
Yes.
for the youth subcommittee, I'd like to know what would their charge be? And who are we thinking would, the kinds of people who will be on this? Is this all students or is it young people in general? Because, and then we had even thought about having a youth representative on this committee. Is that still up for discussion? And that would be somebody that the town hall would, the select board would have to then interview for, if that's a suggestion. But I just don't feel I have a real understanding of exactly what the youth subcommittee would do, what oversight it would need, because if it doesn't have a member, or even with a member, we probably should have another adult member as part of that subcommittee. So I'd like a little bit of feel of why is it here, what would it do? And I do think that the youth voice is needed. I agree 100%, but I don't have a feel for exactly what it would look like yet. I feel like Tom that way. And as far as the hate crimes subcommittee, is that a subcommittee of us?
Yes.
We have, all we can do is recommend things to the select board. That's our only power in life. We can ask questions of people. So if you have a hate crime committee, it usually, from people what I've heard from other towns, it is something that's set up independently that reports itself to the select board. And so we would have no oversight. We could recommend that they set up a hate crime subcommittee, and at that point in time, we'd have to tell them why they would do it, how much it would cost, and that's something that could be part of the things, like I think what Natasha was saying, that we would have gone through and decided, from our stuff, that's what we need to recommend. That could be a recommendation we're recommending to the select board. But for ourselves, to have people come and tell us all these things, we can't give them solace. We can't fix it for them. We are not in the right spot.
We can make recommendations, and we don't have any time to go and see what recommendations we should make for hate crimes committee. So the subcommittee would function to tell us and collect and gather information to let us know what's needed for our recommendations. The youth committee, I would say, would be the same thing. It would be a reporting of what's going on to let us know what would be helpful in terms of recommendations at the town level. So that's the point of those things. I would say it's not working at all. And I would say both of these things are urgent. I would say that I don't want this committee to drag their feet like other committees or non-committees or advisory boards or whatever have been doing. And I would say that it is something that we can do to collect and gather information. And we don't have time to necessarily do that individually because we've already got our own tasks to do. But we can.
But a subcommittee would have to be one of us, Nikki. It's not somebody else.
Well, I understand that, but one of us would be leading the subcommittee, but not necessarily gathering. For instance, Maura is, select person Curran is a part of this advisory committee, but we're doing the hunting and the gathering. Do you see? And so one of us would be a part of that subcommittee or each subcommittee, but they would be doing the hunting and the gathering.
But then
Right.
can't you just, but for that, you could just decide, you know, just like you asked if I would do public work, public, what am I doing?
Safety.
Safety, thank you. It's that time of night. Public safety. You could say somebody's working on hate crimes. We don't really have to vote that, right? I mean, just like somebody is working with procurement, somebody's working with, somebody could work with hate crimes.
I think it's, I'll say this, and I think we should adjourn. It's been, we've spent quite a bit of time tonight, and we're clearly going to need more discussion, but I'll say this. I think it is significant to have a group of people dedicated to both of these topics. I think it's significant for this particular committee to have that kind of information. What are other towns doing? What are we not doing? How many incidents have happened? What kind of incidents were there? People to keep track of these things. I think that's very important. I think there are people, I know there are people willing and ready to do that for us. I also know that there are youth willing and ready to do the same thing amongst young people in our community. And we need that information. It's relative to a full and complete recommendation for the town on the issues that we are dealing with. Obviously, we need to talk more about this, and especially how, if we're going to do it, it would happen, and what, if we're going to do it, we would want from them. So I hope that we do think about this for our next meeting. That brings us to new business. I don't know, suggestions for actions that could be easily adopted and meaningful. I don't know what that's about. Does anyone want to?
Yeah, I had recommended that to you, Nikki and Ruth, for the agenda. So when we do, come to the select board at the end of the quarter and report out on our processes and where we are, if we could dedicate maybe like significant time at the next meeting or the one after that to discuss maybe some low-hanging fruit while we do all this, have all these conversations, etc. Like maybe there are no-brainers that, Lucia, Mandy, and Bob can tell us like, oh, we don't have a process for this, or we don't have that, but we want one, because maybe then we can recommend to the select board that they approve that and then give them, the power to do it. And one example came up at the last meeting when Jeremy and Celia, the students, said, oh, there's no student handbook. Well, I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's a town handbook for town employees. If there isn't, Bob is on the committee. If Bob would like to do that, then that's a good win for us and, Bob. There's a reason I think HR is on the committee. So that's just one example of a low-hanging fruit or recommendation we could make immediately to get working on, because some of the other stuff is just going to take more time. But that was the kind of discussion I was hoping we could have.
Okay, so let's have that discussion at the next meeting. I think that's super important, and I would love those things to be included in our first set of recommendations, or at least some. So let's have that discussion. I'll just say, like, really quickly on the establishment of a Cape Verdean sister city. I spoke with I sent an email to Miss Dre about this, and she's very willing to work on this. We do have a community member that's also already looked into some stuff that would make that a lot easier for you, Miss Dre. Is that something that this committee, this is an example of a low-hanging fruit recommendation that you might be willing to look into with this volunteer and maybe give us a idea of how that process works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to look into it. But I don't know how much of a low-hanging fruit it is.
I see.
Just looking at the other sister cities, that are out there, and they are advisory committees appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So I think it's more complicated than, just a nice social sister city, which I would love to, set up for Cape Verde. And just it's Cape Verde or Cabo Verde. Cape Verdean is what they call us as far as ethnicity, but if you're referring to Cape Verde, you would say Cape Verde, V-E-R-D-E, or Cabo Verde, just as a housekeeping.
Thank you. No, it's a norm, and ask if you don't know or inform if you do. Perfect. Good to know. Thank you. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind giving us a little, this is how it's done, maybe at our next meeting.
Yeah,
That
I
would
will.
be great.
What I'll do is I'll reach out to, there's the sister city of Ireland, and then there's one in France right now.
Mhm.
But it does look something like
Like it's a bit of a process, yeah.
Yeah, not a
Quick,
low-hanging
yeah.
fruit.
Okay, good to know.
And I believe
Um,
it's Nat Chakar is the head of the one for France, and she's very accessible.
Okay,
I'm sure I could get her contact information if you need it.
sure, that'd be
Wonderful.
great.
Thank you,
Thanks, Chris.
thank you. Okay, public comment. I don't know that there is any. I think it's just us at this point. And what else? Other business. I just had one thing, which was I think that I have sent volunteers from the community to most of you, not all of you yet. And I will continue to do that. When I send someone to you, it's because I've heard something that you've said, and I know, or have sent to me in the initial questions I sent to you, and I know that these are people that are working on these things in the community in a very serious way. So I don't think I've sent anyone to you, Ms. Harriman, but I will work on that, and I will definitely do that. So I actually have someone in mind, but I do hope that you connect with the people that I send you, because they are phenomenal resources and major advocates for people of color. So, and for the LGBTQIA+ community as well. So they are soldiers in the community that have proven that repeatedly, and I hope that you do stay in contact with them. Okay, that's all I have, or we have. Is there anything else for tonight? Yes, Ms. Silvera.
Head off. I just happened to get the Mariner today, and there's that police and the new reform bill with Thompson speaking, and how it'll affect Scituate and all of that. So I didn't read through it. I just skimmed. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Just letting you guys know that it's there in case you want to read it. I did read quickly that 63% of the part-time officers happen to be female officers, and I thought that was pretty cool. But that was just me skimming through it. It was just something I happened to
Yeah, it's good.
gloss over.
It's a good article. Yep.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Silvera. Anyone else? Anything else? All right, so we are good to take this task up again at our next meeting, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Okay, again, just to confirm, our next meeting would be March 2nd. And can I motion to adjourn?
Thank you, Mr. Seen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Risha. And I will call the roll. Ms. Stray,
Yes.
Reverend Stewart,
Yes.
Vice Chair Secor,
Yes.
Ms. Yassin,
Yes.
Ms. Risha,
Yes.
Ms. Harriman,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Seth for doing all of our IT work.